Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. We are coming to you today from the Business Leaders for Michigan's CEO Summit at the Westin Book Cadillac Hotel in downtown Detroit. The gathering brings together top executives from business and higher education, along with policymakers and community leaders to talk about creating a healthy economy in the state. So coming up on this edition of MiWeek, we'll take an in-depth look at Michigan's current business climate and the forecast for the next few years. Plus, we will analyze the many reforms taking place that impact the state and the city of Detroit's economic growth. But we do start with Business Leaders for Michigan, a group of working to make Michigan a top 10 state for jobs and for personal income. What will it take to reach that goal? And where do we stand today? Here to help answer these questions is the president and the CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan, Doug Rothwell. Doug, it's good to see you. Welcome back to MiWeek.
Great to see you.
All right, and as always, we have our contributors here with us, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Another successful CEO Summit for you again this year, Doug.
Yeah, you know, this event has really taken off. I mean, it started about 4 years ago. We didn't really know what to expect, but we were trying to fill a void, Christy. We felt that there needed to be kind of a half-day session where people could learn not only how to improve the state, but also their own organizations and businesses. Because our philosophy is, look, if all the businesses and organizations in Michigan are strong, the state's going to be strong too. And we've put together, I think, a program that really is unique, and it's great that it's here in Detroit.
All right, I think the bottom line that people really want to know is, how is Michigan doing right now?
Well, in one word, I'd say better. We specifically, I think, have done a great job improving the cost competitiveness of Michigan. And you know, you go back to all the corporate tax climate changes that we've made, the fact that we're phasing out the personal property tax, a tax that is really a burden on people that want to invest in this state. Those are all really good things. And if you look at the numbers, we're now either average or above average on most of those metrics. But the concern we've got is on the value side. And we like to say, you know, that it's like a business. You want to provide the best value for money. And Michigan's doing a pretty good on the cost side, but not as well on value. And we can talk a little bit more about what some of those things might mean.
All right.
Doug, is that a policy challenge? We've changed a lot of policies. As you mentioned, the state is growing. We've certainly come a long way since the lost decade. But from here on, to get to where we want to be top 10, does that require more policy changes, or is that a cultural shift?
I think it's both, Nolan. I mean, I think certainly culture is a big part of it. We have to start having an attitude that we are going to win or lose together, as opposed to in individual regions or parties. And we've made a lot of progress on that. I think since that lost decade, it did bring us together more as a state, but I do worry about complacency setting in. I think we have often in Michigan, our biggest mistake has been we look at the progress we've made relative to how we've done in the past, not relative to how that compares to other places that we're competing with. So we like to talk about our growth rate, for example. Well, that's good, but it's not so good when you say, well, in absolute terms, we're still average or below average on personal income, on jobs, GDP, the measures that you most care about in terms of your competitiveness.
So what's on your policy wish list?
Well, we basically say at this point there's 3 or 4 things that we need to do. We've been saying for a long time, talent is the big issue that businesses care about. More and more jobs are going to require an education beyond high school. We are, at this point, not doing a good job in Michigan fulfilling that need. We may be doing better, but other places are doing better faster than we are to get there. Second is that you need to have a strong economic development effort. Other states are taking advantage of this great economy. They're investing more in their economic development programs. In Michigan, we have been cutting those budgets, and that we think is the wrong thing to do. Third is we have great assets in Michigan, our engineering talent, our auto industry, our natural resources, but we vacillate from election cycle to election cycle, whether we think it's important to have some core things that we focus on and invest in or not. And all of that comes back to your first point. It's about cohesion, it's about a common vision and strategy for the future that we need everybody to embrace.
Talk about that investment agenda. Everyone was really gung-ho when we were cutting taxes and people were getting more money in their pockets than before. People are less enthused about things that will cost us more, and roads, of course, comes to mind. The frustration that the governor has had for 4 years trying to get something through. We finally get a deal, and it's sort of a mess. It doesn't really invest the way we would like it to. How do we get to the place where we can talk about investment in a mature and sort of embracing way in Michigan?
Well, I think first of all, we got to do a better job at educating and making people aware of what an investment gets you. I don't think we did a very good job with that with roads. I think we were so preoccupied with what it would take to fill the potholes and fix that problem, as opposed to, we didn't really make an investment in our future. Mark Murray, one of my board members, says it really well. He says, do we want to be a state of 12 million, 10, or 8 million people? And I think we want to be a state of 12 million people. We want to grow. But we're not going to be able to grow if all we're doing is worrying about fixing potholes to keep us from being a state of 8 million people. And again, I think that's incumbent upon us as business leaders and also the political leaders to do a better job at selling that.
Do you feel like there are structural problems in the way that we elect people in the state that are contributing to that? Term limits comes to mind.
Well, most of our business leaders would say they're very frustrated with term limits, the political process in general, where it seems right now that everything's decided in primaries. You've got these extremes on both ends that are really kind of controlling too much of the agenda, and the problem is, what do you do about it? I think that it's, all the polling I've seen, at least, people still are, I think, a little reticent to abandon term limits. You could argue that, look at the last few years, we have made a lot of progress, and that's been with term limits in place. So I don't know, Stephen, but I think if you ask business leaders, they would say there are issues that need to be fixed.
Let's talk a little bit about perception, because you talked about infrastructure and the fact that the roads deal, they tried to get it done for 4 years, and we ended up with something that's not making everybody happy anyway. Higher education, the funding for that has been cut a number of years in a row, and also we're talking about the cuts to the MEDC. So how does that make Michigan look to the rest of the country, or to businesses outside of Michigan who are perhaps thinking about investing? How does this make us look to everyone else?
Well, again, I think it goes back to, we can't be satisfied with the fact that we've had a pretty good run here the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, in business, it's what have you done for me lately? And if I'm a governor of another state right now, I'm going to look at Michigan and say, hey, look, that's a state, can you trust those guys to really be able to back up their economic development deals or not, because they're cutting the budget? Or, look at Albert Perez at our conference today said Florida, one area of Florida, is investing $10 billion in their infrastructure. We're investing $1 billion for the whole state. And these are things that, again, I think if you just measure our progress by where we've been in the past, $1 billion sounds good. But if you look at it compared to what other people are doubling down on, that's what concerns us.
Well, Doug, we cut business taxes, we changed regulations, made this a more business-friendly state, and we've seen some growth over the last few years. Now you have some labor unions out there circulating petitions to raise the business tax by $1 billion or so. What would that do to the business climate?
It'd be horrible. I mean, it would undo virtually all the progress that we've just made. I mean, again, it goes back to, you want to be a state that business feels they can trust, they can invest in for the long term. They're making billion-dollar investments, and they need to know that they're going to be able to get a safe return on that investment, and over not just a year, but 10, 20 years down the road. And every time in Michigan we get to this point again where we do better, we get a little complacent, we say, oh, well, maybe we don't have to do this kind of hard work as much anymore. And I think you see it with proposals like that say, well, economy's better, why not raise corporate taxes?
But the reason that the unions feel that way is because their members haven't benefited from the giant tax breaks we gave to business 4 years ago. I mean, it's not showing up in people's paychecks. And so I think the question becomes, how do you make this matter to everybody, not just business?
Yeah, Stephen, we really are concerned about the rise of personal incomes. I mean, that's one of the big things we think we need to address, and it's a reason why we're so strong on supporting education and higher education in particular. We think that really is the way to break through that issue, but I wouldn't say that we haven't seen anything come through from the tax changes that were made. I mean, we've grown over 400,000 jobs in the state, and so maybe incomes didn't go up as much as we'd like, but we did recapture about half those jobs we lost during the lost decade as well, which is important.
I want to talk about the funding that was cut from the MEDC. How does that mean that the MEDC is going to function now? It lost about 25% of its budget.
Right. Well, I mean, it's going to just have to do less. It's not going to go away. The MEDC is still a great organization. They've got a lot of good people there. But what it does is it inhibits their ability to be consistent in terms of the strategies and programs they're supporting year in and year out. So let's take an example. We went in the last 5 years from having a lot of tax credits that we could use to incent business to locate here to having none. We went to cash-based incentives. Okay, but that means then, are we going to be consistent in terms of the level of support we provide to do that or not? We haven't been. we've been up, down, and so it's difficult if you're at the MEDC and you're trying to cut deals to bring business here. What do I have to work with? What can I do to help my local communities be able to really make sure that these projects happen in our state?
Just briefly, Doug, you're back from Israel, a group of CEOs went there. What did you learn?
You know, you hear about Startup Nation. I mean, that's the book that's been really popular. I think really has branded Israel, and actually a little branding like that would be helpful for us. I actually was not feeling as though they had any more of a startup nation than we did. I think there's a lot of great success stories in Michigan. What I did see, though, is back to the cohesion and culture. Partly because a country that's been under attack, they feel like they're all in it for one. It's all in for one. There's a feeling of urgency that, again, combats that complacency that we talked about for us sometimes. And the other is I think it's a sense of government can be a force for good. They need it to be in a place like that, but I think sometimes here in Michigan we have an ambivalency as to whether government is on the right or wrong side of being able to get the job done. And I would say we don't have a choice. It's got to be on the right side. In this world that we're in today, let's not make it the enemy. Let's get it right. Let's get the right policy, but let's not fight it either.
Last question before I let you go. We are here with you about a year after Detroit has emerged from bankruptcy. How crucial is Detroit's continue moving forward to the health of Michigan?
Well, a couple of our speakers said it today. I couldn't agree more. It is the story for Michigan. It is the biggest, strongest selling card we have right now in terms of changing perceptions of this place. We need it to continue. We need to make sure that nothing gets in the way of this turnaround success story. I don't see anything getting in the way right now, but it's the biggest thing that we've got going.
All right, Doug Rothwell, CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. It's always good to see you.
Great.